Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my new friend, Diva Diaz. Say hi.
Hi, Angie.
I'm excited for this one. Well, first of all, we're showing up with the great curly hair, like the matchiness makes me happy. Second, we tried so hard to get this date on the calendar because Diva is in Italy. Tell me more about Italy.
I am. I'm in Italy and I'm usually traveling a lot, but I have the immense pleasure of managing a luxury boutique castle hotel. So that's where I am right now in Italy, northern Italy.
Oh my gosh. Sorry, I didn't mean to get all shrieky on you, but that's the kind of stuff I love. I was literally just looking at my Facebook memories earlier, and I think it was 4 years ago, I went to Disney World with two of my best friends dressed as the evil queen. I'm real into the castle stuff.
Oh, I hear you 100%.
Well, that's awesome. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So here, I managed to be in this incredible location, it's like 1,000-year-old castle. It is filled with original antiques. It is gorgeous and lush, and I get to really be very creative with my day-to-day on top of other businesses that I do. So it really is just, super fun and a very nurturing space.
What other businesses do you do? Tell me a little bit more about that. I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I'd say one of my main businesses is in self-development, if you like. It's I use a technique called access consciousness, and it's really all about empowering people to know what they know and to not have to kind of follow everyone else's answers, if you like. So it's all about kind of really strengthening that muscle of self-trust. And I've kind of really always had a lot of focus on people who are neurodiverse. So I apply those tools in this area, which to me is of personal interest. I get to enjoy seeing people improve their lives.
Oh, that's incredible. I don't know much about access consciousness, but I know that I've heard about that before. Can you go a little deeper into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's basically, I remember somebody asked me this when I started about 14 years ago, and they're like, what is it? And the thing that I said at the time, which I just remembered again the other day, was it's, there's no head office. There's nothing to follow. There's no one to follow, but it's like a collection of tools and processes and questions that when you apply them to your lifestyle, just make things easier. Mm-hmm. I often describe it in the way that, if you like yoga, you might do yoga a lot 1 month and then the next month, not so much. And then sometimes you might use it for a specific target, and other times you just do it for general maintenance or fun. So to me, it's something really similar that, using these tools, you get to just play and have more of what works for you, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. And I love something that you mentioned too about kind of, well, I don't know if this is accurate entirely, but I love this philosophy of you already have the answers. Because I don't know if you've encountered this in your flavor of entrepreneurship, especially with the multiple businesses, but there tends to be this idea of I can't succeed, or I'm limited, or I'm capped until I learn this strategy, or I try that funnel, or I try that tactic, or I meet with that consultant. It's it always feels like there's more. And there's always a book to read, or a launch to follow, or a conference to attend, or something like that. Would you say that this is helpful in filtering out all of that and going, yes, this is the right path? Or am I totally off base?
No, you're 100% correct. And I think your use of the word filtering through all of that was just genius, because that's exactly what it is. There's so much information. I mean, I tried a lot of self-development, techniques and different modalities before coming across this, because I used to work in the corporate world. Mm-hmm. And I was always so stressed, but very capable, but also not stressed at the same time. It was so many different things, a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, a lot of high achieving, perfectionism. And then I was thinking, well, when do I get to be happy? when do I get to?
I'm writing that. That is such a poignant question that I'm writing that down and I'm circling it. When do I get to be happy? I
Yeah.
think you hit the nail on the head with like something that so many of us freak out about, both in entrepreneurship and in employeeship and life. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
No, no, please, absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, with what you were saying about there's so many different things out there. There's always another book, another technique. I was just overwhelmed, to be honest. And it felt like anything that I did was never going to be good enough because then there'd be something else. But it was always something else that was following what someone else had done. So of course it worked for them because they're them. And I know that sounds super cheesy, but I could never get those things to work for me in that same way or to that same level of success, which then further added to my already existing self-doubt of I'm probably not quite good enough. So therefore I need another 10 books, another 5 courses. And,
That is such like a self-fulfilling little, the word that came to mind is circle jerk. So I'm just going to say it. That happens a lot, especially in marketing circles where it's like, well, you won't be successful until you have this one tactic. When you try this one tactic and it doesn't work for you for a variety of reasons, right? But then that doubt, or sometimes it's the messaging, which really bothers me, kicks in and says, well, like you did it wrong. Something is messed up, without that acknowledgement of maybe it didn't work for you. Maybe it doesn't work for this industry. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe any number of things as to why this didn't work. And it's not your fault. That shit happens. And it drives me nuts when we feel like it's our fault. We're doing something wrong just because something didn't work. Maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of, this that has been so empowering is that before, to be honest, I wasn't really empowered. I was just given answers. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like other things I've tried before, but the way that I was doing it or what I was looking for, I was looking for somebody to give me the answer. If I'm completely honest with myself, like how do I become successful in this? What are the 3 things I need to do to blah, 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 but that's not really empowering because you're always kind of looking outside of you. And as an entrepreneur, that goes entirely against the fiber of your being because otherwise you wouldn't be an entrepreneur. And so it was like this complete conflict in my mind the whole time. Whereas with these tools, it suddenly puts everything back on me, so back on you, asking yourself the questions, which of course sometimes isn't comfortable because you're like, someone just give me the answer, damn it. But then, but at the same time, it really nurtures that entrepreneurial part of your mind and creativity that was what got you started in the first place.
I think that's the beauty of this, that we kind of learn to live in the uncertainty, and that if you start to feel a little bit too comfortable, that might be a sign to pay attention to get back into that space of, I don't want to say that you're purposefully making yourself uncomfortable or putting yourself in discomfort, but like if you're coasting, that's a completely different story from what you're trying to build, and maybe a sign that it got a little bit too comfortable. We need to get back into this, shake things up. And I'm not saying to shake things up just for the sake of shaking things up, but you articulated it in such a way that I don't think I've heard anybody else say, which is that like directly calling out the dichotomy of I'm an entrepreneur and I'm responsible for what happens, right? There was I don't know if you've ever seen the show Working Moms, but there was a quote that the husband said to the wife when her agency was failing and she was really scared. And he looked at her and he said, nobody's coming to save you. And it was just like heart drop into your stomach kind of moment. And then she took that and went, right, nobody's coming to save. It's up to me. Ooh, I get to do stuff, right? Like if you can get past that stomach dropping moment of nobody's coming to save you, nobody has the answers for you. Nobody can tell you how to do you and find success in your particular way with your offer and your people. What do you get to do with all of that? Oh, it's an incredible freedom and power, even if it's a bit terrifying.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. And that's, I think to me, that's always been my, just my way of functioning, which I think I see in a lot of entrepreneurial friends as well, where maybe you grew up and there wasn't anyone that was going to save you. So you just had to start. I don't know if it's like a switch in your brain or you're born with that creativity or what, but you just have to start functioning from a different way, which is exactly what you're saying, like, all right, so then I get to do this. So now what do I want to create here?
You get to try things and you get to experiment. I think we put a whole lot of pressure on ourselves to figure out the quote unquote right answer, to minimize the risk of any given decision or any given route that we're trying to take. And I understand that from a business perspective. We always are looking to minimize our risk, minimize our exposure however we can. That's just smart business. And also sometimes you just got to try shit and see what happens because your soul said to do it. And it doesn't make any sense to anybody else around you, but that's how innovation happens.
100%. And also, if you look at it, all of these different systems that we're looking to follow or techniques, that's how that happened for them, because it was the first time they were doing it most of the time. And then everyone tries to jump on board and copy the same thing, only it's now turned into something else.
Yes. We were talking about that in a random marketing group the other day when somebody was talking about like saturation points and when everybody's doing the same thing. And I was like, we got to be careful. My industry is direct response marketing. It's like sales writing. Like we got to be careful to assume that just because we see a lot of other direct response marketers doing this tactic, that everybody in the world is doing it. Those two things are not equal. You just can't assume that everybody in business is doing this now because it's the hot new tactic. And actually, my last guest said this perfectly, like we zig when others zag. So if everybody is following this shiny new trend over here, bet your ass Angie's going to be over here in the corner going, what can I do that is not that? Something else, please.
Exactly. And I love that you asked that too, Angie, because I think that's one of the key things, which is asking a question, like, what can I do that's different to this? And that's, to me, the times where I've had less success or failed, or I've just downright been kind of depressed with life and business, has been because I've stopped asking those questions. At some point, I've thought that it was better to follow somebody else, or, okay, fine, I will finally focus my ADHD brain and do this in order and be linear. And by the end of it, I'm not linear. I'm just depressed because I've stopped asking those questions that actually nurtured my natural way of being. Yes.
I love that you brought that up, like neurodiversity, ADHD, thinking the way you think versus trying to adopt somebody else's process. I'm a big fan, like I said, of experimenting. You get to try different things. I'm not opposed to trying somebody's method. In fact, one of my mentors put it to me in a very interesting way when I was having a big moment of doubt. It was like I had failed at my first freelance attempt at writing. I'm about to leave this cushy corporate gig and try the second time. And of course, all of the old fears are popping up. And he goes, I can see around this corner. I know it's a blind corner for you and you can't see what's coming. So this is the part where you just trust and you try things and we see what happens. So, you know, I don't know what else to tell you other than that. You got to try it and you've got to trust. So I don't know entirely where I'm going with that, but I do think it's great that like we can open, especially the neurodiverse people of us, like, we can open ourselves to different paths and different ways of thinking. Just got to be cognizant of, am I doing this because I don't have faith in myself and I think somebody else knows better? Or because I'm genuinely like, you know what? I don't really know what to do next. And that one sounds good. Let's try it. It's totally different energies.
Absolutely. Or even, am I not doing this because I don't have faith in myself because of everything that I've read and learned that has told me that if I don't follow this linear pattern and way of doing things, then I'm going to be wrong. When actually all of that stuff was written for the majority and not the minority who are neurodivergent.
Yes. And the interesting thing about the marketing background that I come from, I'm like, you know what stood out to me was how simple this stuff can be if you let it be. I'm fortunate that the name of this show has a really good name, like Permission to Kick Ass. That's not just me puffing myself up. It's a really good name. And that one I got from my mentor. I talk about it a little bit in my book, but it can be simple. It can be permission to kick ass. I work with entrepreneurs to kick ass. It can be having an awesome name like Diva. Oh my gosh, shout that out to the rooftops. I get to be the diva, and lean into that branding if that's what strikes you. It doesn't have to be this overblown, super complicated shit that we've made it out to be, where we're creating funnels on top of funnels and evergreen and automation and Facebook ads and front end tripwire. And these things were created so people could sell their products to you. You don't necessarily need probably 80% or more of these things to make an incredible business for yourself. I know people out there running multi-million-dollar businesses that don't even have a freaking website. So don't tell me that you need something to make it work. Like, don't buy into that bullshit.
100%. And there are some things that you can't sell as well. I mean, I remember when I started Access Consciousness and, you know, I also work for the company. And I remember speaking with the founder and he's like, everyone tries to sell this. You can't sell it because you can't sell empowerment, really.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sell like people becoming more self-aware and having more ease in their lives. He's like, stop selling this. Just tell people that, if they ask you a question and that's it. And
Yeah.
that changed my perspective so much on how to build a business, because the way that access consciousness has been built, it has really just been word of mouth and people seeing what others are doing and going, hey, what are you doing that's different? Because that seems to be working more than what I'm doing. And that's exactly what I did when I found it as well. And it's nice to be able to deliver that and not feel like I've got to do this in the way that everyone else does it.
Mm-hmm. I love that conversation. What is working for you? That is something that we don't talk about enough in business circles. Like it's easy to see the new class coming out, the new course, the new book, the big launch that's happening, and think that that is what's really working. And then you actually talk to your friends and hear, like, I come from the launch world in the background. The reality is that 90% of my friends and colleagues who have businesses don't use launches. And that's fine. Yeah. It works for the people who use the big internet marketing launches, and it doesn't work for the people that don't use it. Like, that's just the way it is. It's fine. But do you ask your friends, what have you tried? What's been working for you? It could be a hell of a lot simpler than it sounds on the surface if you're paying attention to the noise.
Yeah, exactly. And even that personal engagement that you're talking about, like, have you asked your friends? Mm-hmm. I think going back to that simplicity, it's like at the end of the day, we're all people. And I think that we can sometimes, not everyone, but it can be easy to be swept away into this machine of production and numbers. And if your business is a bit different and you're not selling, I don't know, vacuum cleaners, like something that you can count and that is, kind of set in what the product is. But if you are selling something different or offering a different service, it's super difficult, so it's super difficult if you don't have that personal interaction added in where you're having those actual conversations with real people. Like you're saying, what actually works for you? Or what would you like to see? Or does this even seem helpful to you? Is this even interesting? Is this relevant? To get that feedback. And I think so much of that can be lost, with a lot of the marketing that we do online. Not to say that it's bad. I do a lot of stuff online, obviously, but hopefully based on a different foundation of having a more personal interaction with people that then allows me to create the content.
And there was something that you said that I thought was brilliant that I wanted to circle back and highlight. I starred this and circled it a couple of times. This idea of being helpful versus selling. That's another thing that I think changes the energy, changes the power dynamic, kind of removes some of the unconscious ick that might come through in the messaging. So I've told folks that I've coached that are building freelance businesses, especially when they are doing client work as a way to get themselves established. No one client, no one project. And by that, I mean, you don't need any one client or any one project. So disabuse yourself of that notion, forbid that from your vocabulary, and remove that desperation energy that's just roiling below the surface from when you go into a client meeting, because you may never say anything, but your behaviors, the way that you act, the offers that you make, the strategies that you put forth are all going to come from that place of, oh my God, I really need this to work. And that's a reactive, very defensive energy versus an open, let's see what ideas, enthusiastic approach, totally different energy. So being helpful. Absolutely. Like how I see that playing into this is if you're going to something with the goal of selling somebody, you're not necessarily in that space of how do I help this person? Can I even help this person? If you go into a discussion with somebody, can I help? How can I help? Here's something that worked for me, and just suggesting something, then you naturally become that trusted resource over time because people just see you out there doing your thing, being helpful. Would you agree with that?
100%. I think, honestly, everything that you said is brilliant because also, I mean, when you're actually willing to go in and, like we're saying, not sell something, but actually be present with the person, that already is creating something entirely different. Because, I mean, if you look at it, how often in our day-to-day interactions do we come across people who are really actually present with us? And I don't mean just staring into each other's eyes, trying to be that kind of present, I hear you exactly, I'm reacting in the correct way to what you're saying. I don't mean that. I mean, truly from being interested in them, not just trying to seem interesting, which is what we do when we try and sell. Look how cool I am by this. I hope I'm not wrong. And I hope that you're going to think I'm right, which is a lot of pressure and stress on everyone, but suddenly if you're becoming interested in the person and you can be present with them, they're going to feel valuable. And when you start to create that, it seems like it may not give you an immediate result, but those are the little seeds that you plant around where, like you're saying, it builds the trust, but it also to me allows people to live for that moment, the service that you're actually offering as well. Yeah. So you're walking and talking it.
Yes. Being it instead of thinking about how to appear to be it. Like, I think that's how we get in our heads. I don't know if you, like what avenues you might be a creative. I suspect you're a very highly creative person. I'm a musician, and there's a big difference. Like, I think other musicians can tell this too. When I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next on stage versus just existing and letting it flow through my body and just interpreting it in the moment. When I'm in my head, it comes out a whole lot stiffer. It comes out very kind of stilted, like performative. But when I'm really in it, I think that's what we talk about being in a flow state. When somebody's work, their dance, their music, their poetry, their writing, whatever, just like connects in your soul. They're just being that thing instead of thinking about how to be it.
Absolutely. And I think that also circles back to, what we were mentioning at the beginning about this tendency that people have to think that they're wrong if they're not doing things in the way that other people do. And if you're constantly looking at, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? You are out of that flow. Like, forget it. You're not being anything other than a mental case in that moment, because all you're doing is you're just living in your head, and you're not even present with the moment. You're thinking that thing you read, how somebody's going to react, what your mom might think about you. Who knows what goes on in our minds? I know my mind can have 1,000 thoughts in a second that have absolutely no logic. And so much to me that can actually change this is starting to get out of that self-criticism, that self-judgment that allows you to be more in the flow of everything, and also gives you really like a much bigger perspective, like a bird's eye view on what's going on, so that you're not just trying to deal with little details that perhaps aren't really pushing things forward in a big way, which for every entrepreneur is usually quite fun when you come across big moves.
Well, it's funny. I wrote something about that this morning too. It was a quote that came out of another episode of Permission to Kick Ass, where I was talking with a therapist, and we talked about, she and I had this strategy in common, call it the freak out timer. And it was like, look, I've come to finally understand that my old method of, I need to be a professional, I need to wear a mask, I need to control how others see me, so I'm not going to feel feelings. I mean, who has time to be human? Am I right? Like, I'm a professional. I hustle and grind, like all of that bullshit, right? No, I'm feeling strong feelings. Like, I just had a complete debacle happen with the publisher of my book, where I had to pull it and move it to another publisher with just over a month to go. And I called a friend of mine and was like, hey, so I'm feeling some things. Are you in a good spot? I just need to like vent for a little bit. And my friend says, yep, absolutely. And I'm like, cool. I'm setting a timer for 15 minutes. And I'm going to be probably possessed by the spirit of something beyond in those 15. Like, whatever I say, don't trust anything I say. I'm becoming another person. Don't worry about me. It's not about you. It's not directed at you. I'm okay. I just need to I need to purge this from my system. And then I will get on the phone with that person and be like, just rage and say everything that pops into my head that I need to say. And then I hear that little ding. Okay. Thank you for letting me get that out of my system. I really love you and appreciate you. I think I can go back and do what needs to be done now. Like, so many of us put that mask on and think about how we need to be again, right? And then that stuff is just roiling under the surface, waiting for a little opening to come spewing out like a geyser.
Yeah, totally. And then it comes out as a reaction, because then you've got no control over it because you've been bottling it up. But also, I think, and I don't know how it's been for you, but for me, historically, those things have been hard when I've felt like I don't have choice.
Yes.
So like I feel completely trapped, and then I have to mask, I have to hide, I have to behave a certain way, which in itself is already the sensation that you don't have freedom of choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I love your technique. You know, you choose it for 15 minutes, but when it stops, you in that moment are making a conscious choice, however much it may feel or not like you're making a conscious choice. You're making a conscious choice to just stop it and go, all right, so now let's take some action. That is no longer the reaction, no longer, that was okay. It's still fine. No judgment or self-critique about that. And now what's next? And I think that's incredible, because that to me is a huge part of what's missing, not only in business, but in our daily lives, where we feel like we've got to put on this front. So everything comes out as a reactive thing, you know, rather than recognizing, okay, I feel this way. That's okay. And now what choice do I have?
Yeah. I had to develop that technique, and I feel like I was inspired by it somewhere, but I can't remember. So if you're listening and you're like, I came up with that technique, all credit to you. Please let me know. Not intending to take credit for that, but I also knew that the intensity, and it tends to happen, I think, in a lot of neurodiverse people. Like, we feel things very intensely, and it can feel catastrophic when you're in the depths of those things. And me personally, if I don't consciously, like you said, choose to put that limit on it, that cap on it, what will happen is I'm going to follow that all the way down the rabbit hole. And we're going to turn this one thing that is mildly inconvenient and just infuriating, who gives customer service like that, and turn it into like, I'm on a mission to destroy them and I will make sure they never publicly talk about an overreaction. It might be entertaining for a moment, but after a bit, everybody's going to be looking at me going, it was just one book, Angie. Why come unglued? Like, just move your book somewhere else, right? Exactly. It feels like you don't have a choice but to follow that all the way down the rabbit hole, but you do have choice, even when it feels like you don't. I loved that you said, when I feel like I don't have a choice. I'm fond of telling people every decision that you make can be unmade. You could take a job and quit it tomorrow. You can move into an apartment or buy a house tomorrow and sell it next week. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but you know, aside from something that results in the end of life as we know it, most decisions can be unmade, can be backtracked. We got to stop treating these things like, I got to get it right or else. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And, you know, thank you for that example, because I was laughing because it was like you were talking about me, basically. Just the other day, like something came up. I can't even remember what. And a friend said to me, hold on a second. You don't need to burn down the house just because you spilt some, you know, and I was like, oh, I don't. And I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing that I'm doing. Okay. All right. You know, and it's grateful that they said that to me. But it is because, you know, with neurodiversity, everything, like the way I describe it is like, if people live on a volume from say 0 to 10, someone who's neurodivergent will be 0 to 10,000. Like that is the, you know, the range. And it obviously, you know, switches between those numbers very, very quickly. But this thing that you're mentioning of not having to get it right, I think is huge. It's huge and it's insidious. But when you catch it, it is so empowering and powerful.
This is why I love having people around you that can reflect the truth back at you. I've talked before about, like, I don't really at this stage buy programs or courses or masterminds because I'm looking for a new tactic or strategy or something that I haven't learned yet. And that's not to say I think I've learned it all, but I think I have enough knowledge by now to be able to make 90 to 95% of my choices with confidence, and then learn the extra little bit that I don't know, right? I'm looking, when I invest in a course or a program or a mastermind, for a loving mirror, somebody that can reflect the truth and the awesomeness back at me that I can't see because my mirror is warped and distorted by my self-judgment and my self-criticism and everything that society tells me that I should be doing, that I'm just not, because my brain doesn't work that way. That's really what I'm looking for, is people that can reflect the awesomeness back. And I'm glad that you had that friend in your corner that was like, remember not to burn the house down. We could just clean that spot off the carpet. It's not the end of it. We're going to replace that carpet. You don't even have to have that carpet anymore. Don't burn the house down.
Yeah. But I think I think, you know, for me, a huge part of being able to go beyond the right and wrong of everything and trying to kind of, do I fit in here? Do I not fit in here? Am I getting this right the way a good entrepreneur should? Or am I failing the way that most entrepreneurs? Because that's actually how that insidious right and wrong point of view then kind of touches everything in life. But I think the beauty of this here is that starting to trust you and how you naturally function is a huge gift. Doesn't mean that you're like, oh, I'm amazing, I'm like the best. I mean, rarely say that to myself. But in that moment when this friend very kindly and lovingly said, hey, maybe you don't need to set everything on fire, I was able to go, oh yeah, I trust that actually that is how it feels to me. Like you were saying, you do feel it with that level of intensity. But maybe just because I feel it doesn't mean that that's the only existing option that I have right now. What other choice do I have? But a big part of that is actually trusting yourself without judgment, not going, oh, I'm so wrong and bad, but that's how I reacted. Why do I always do this? Or again, but actually just going, oh yeah, actually, I remember that's me. That's kind of what I like to do. I find it amusing for the time that it's amusing, and then I get over myself. So maybe I'll just get over myself now. But that's also, getting out of that self-judgment, because you're then trusting who you are and you're not trying to be different. As corny as that sounds too, but really it is.
Yeah. I mean, like in society, especially with the eye on bullying that's been happening in the last 5 to 10 years, right? We talk about kindness, but it's funny how often we talk about kindness in terms of being kind to other people and still have trouble being kind with ourselves and saying, oh my gosh, I always do this. Like one of these days, I'm going to have somebody commission this drawing. But if anything, I see business as what I call an upward spiral. Meaning we're going to encounter probably the same 3 or 4 recurring issues at different levels, at different stages. It's always going to come back around to the same struggles, the same problems. I'll give you an example, which was earlier this year, I had a business partnership that didn't work out the way that I hoped. And my reaction to this, nobody ever likes a breakup, right? I don't think anything bad about this person, but it's uncomfortable and there are feelings involved when a breakup happens in most contexts. So my reaction was to just like violently swing this pendulum the other way as fast and as hard as I can. I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm done with marketing. I'm not doing copywriting anymore. I'm going to talk about leadership and I'm going to talk about communications. And that's my new thing. And I'm going to burn down everything I've done for 13 years and I'm going to go all in on this. Thank goodness. I went to a conference with somebody and I didn't even know him, but he picked up on the fact that I was reacting instead of choosing to do something different. And he just gently questioned me like, are you sure you're done with copywriting? Because let's just do a hypothetical. If money wasn't an object, what would you be doing for the rest of your life? And I go to my standby joke. I'd be Stephen King, but without the cocaine. I would just be a prolific writer. And he goes, so tell me why you feel like you need to abandon the writing side of yourself and go all in on this leadership and communications thing. And through just a series of questions of him challenging my judgment, I realized I'm not done with this. I'm done with the client work piece of it. I don't want to write for anybody else. If I had my druthers, I would turn Permission to Kick Ass into just this big entrepreneurial brand that is about getting more people into business, even if they don't feel like they have business skills. You're like, I'm too creative to work with spreadsheets. Like, me too. You can still learn it. But I needed that. And I didn't even know that I needed it. And I didn't even recognize that I was repeating an old pattern of I'm done with this, just burn it all down. Until somebody was able to reflect that back. And I don't know if you're done. Do you feel like you're done? This is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? And then that helped me arrive at this conclusion of business mentor for rule breakers and rebels, which is what I've been calling myself for a few weeks now. And it just feels so much better every single time I repeat that. And people go, I don't even know what that is, but I want it. And I go, yes.
I love that. And you know what? It's going back to what you were saying too a while ago about the simplicity of things. Like if you allow things to be simple, they can be. If you don't, then they certainly won't be because you're not allowing it. But the fact that this person could ask you one simple question, he didn't have an agenda. He didn't want you to necessarily be a writer for any particular personal gain. He was just empowering you to look at what was actually true for you. And that one simple question opened up a whole world for you. And I think one of the things that I've kind of noticed a lot in entrepreneurs, and tell me if you've come across this too, but whichever way we're wired or unwired, perhaps, it's like I certainly for myself had to grow up wondering, how do I do this? You guys are all doing this way, but how am I supposed to? And wait, what do I do to make this work? And what's my way? So I was constantly in question without noticing it. So that works to a certain degree when you're in school and you're getting by, you're doing your homework, whatever, and then you go to university. But then out in the bigger world, it's like we stop asking even those questions. But the entrepreneur, the neurodiverse person, that's just wired into them because they need to know how to function. And so to me, one of the great gifts of, being neurodivergent is that there is a different way that we have to question everything around us, not questioning like from a defensive perspective, or to create that fight or whatever, but really being in question of what is this? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, do I need to change this? How do I change it? What do I do? Which is a very, very different way of thinking. And the results that you get from that are dynamic. Like this one person asking you one single question has just completely changed the course of where you were heading. And to me, that is invaluable. That is absolutely invaluable because that's something that's kind of built into us that I think for entrepreneurs, if you start to recognize that you have that, it really allows you to like bring that to the forefront and not just have it as something that you're doing by yourself in your head that you don't even recognize that you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think like having people like that can be that loving mirror helps you to get to know yourself. And you can find so many answers in being brave enough to get to know yourself better. And we're talking about, the dark side, the shadow side, whatever you want to call it, as well as everything that's good about you and doing it without judgment. So like in him asking those questions and that's bravery too, reflecting back at a complete stranger. Are you sure about that? Because it's easier to go, okay, well, the question you asked me was, how do I make a hard pivot from this business to that without sacrificing my revenue? The question behind that seems like, are you really done with this? Right. How he helped me recognize that I was repeating an old pattern that needed to break was I feel, and this is just reflective of me, but maybe some people listening will feel this too. I feel a great deal of comfort in building. I am a builder. I don't know if you're into human design. I'm a generator. Like, give me a thing that needs to get done by next week, and I will have it built in about 4 hours. Like, I can see all of the pieces of a very complicated marketing campaign, like an exploded engineering diagram in front of my face. I know all the things that need to happen to make this work. And so I think that was the pattern that he helped me realize I was falling into. This thing is frustrating. I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. I'm feeling a lot of resistance. I'm feeling a lot of feelings. So abandon that. And so that I don't feel worthless, let's go build something and just feel like we're being productive. But that's the thing. Feel like I'm being productive, but I'm just kind of spinning my wheels, repeating this old pattern.
Exactly. And then it goes back to the thing that you mentioned about being comfortable, which we don't realize that we're coasting, but in a way that's kind of a way to not necessarily coast, but go back to what's comfortable, even though that's probably not the most comfortable building something from scratch, although it is super fun. But, but it's again, being in that comfortable space rather than being willing to look at a question like that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, and I think he was brilliant too, because for him to ask you that question, he also had to be willing for you to not like him.
Yes.
Because he wasn't actually answering you at all. He went somewhere else and he could have been poking you in a sore spot, So that was really brilliant and kind on his behalf.
Oh, he absolutely was poking me. Shout out to Donnie and the team over at Success Champions Network and the Badass Business Summit, because that's where all of this went down. He was absolutely poking me. Like, he wasn't giving me enough time to sit and think and like come up with the appropriate professional response to this. And by the end of it, I can't even remember exactly what question he asked, but I think it revolved around why. Like, why are you even doing all of this? And I threw out off the top of my head, and I was like full of emotion when I said that, because I don't want another creative person to go to their grave thinking that they're not good enough, that they're not smart enough, that they can't figure this out, and that they don't have something to offer this world. And like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps just saying that. I'm in tears. Everybody else sitting at this little small group meeting is in tears. People are coming up to me afterward going, I don't know what workshop you're teaching, but I want in. And that was when I realized, like, oh, I've done it again. I've fallen into this trap of I need to make it more complicated. I need to build something. I need to feel productive versus I just need to go into my heart and ask me what matters most to me. What matters most is helping creative people create, however that looks to them. So let's follow that mission. Okay, cool. Uncomfortable again. Yay.
Yeah. And I love that because that's also the thing that you can't sell in a traditional way.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's there and when it's the thread that's underneath everything, people feel it and they sense that and they get drawn to it. Like you said, they're like, I don't know what you're offering, but I want in.
Mm-hmm. And that circles back so nicely to what you were talking about at the beginning with access consciousness and like, how do you sell something like that? You really don't. I don't just go up to people and say like, hi, I'm Angie and I don't want another creative person to go like, that's a lot to just drop on somebody like a load of heavy library books in their lap. Like, what are you even doing? But that's my hope in creating content, having wonderful discussions like this with entrepreneurs like you is to convey that meaning. Like, you're not alone. You're not fucking it up.
Yeah.
You're not doing everything wrong. You're not setting yourself back by years. Like your timing is your own. Your mission is fine. The people that are in your corner are really in your corner. Like, trust them to be who they show you they are.
Oh, 100%. I love that you said that. Trust them to be who they show you they are. Because that obviously works in both ways. Like when they're showing you something that is not going to be generative for you. I've made the mistake so many times of not listening, wanting to believe in the good of people or making up excuses for the person that they weren't even making up themselves, which is reinventing these things. But I think it's interesting how, again, looking at like, are you willing to have that discomfort of actually being really kind of brutally honest with yourself and not brutal from like, I'm going to punch myself in the head as I admit this to myself, but brutally honest because it can feel brutal knowing the truth. It can feel like I don't even want to know what's true here because I actually already do know what's true here, which is why I won't look at it. But again, when you're willing to ask yourself those questions, like you did, with the direction that you were going in, and like so many of us entrepreneurs have to deal with so many different key points during our creative paths. It's super empowering too.
Oh man, I had no expectations or idea where this conversation would go when we started it, but I have loved having this conversation. I hope you had as good a time as I did.
Thank you. Me too.
I feel like I stopped it right now because I had like 5 questions that I wanted to ask that I realized would take us for like 2 more hours of just ranting and rambling. So I'm going to say, I think we need a part 2. I definitely need to learn more about Diva, about access consciousness, and all of the stuff that you are working on. For now, I will say, tell us more about your business. How do we get in touch? How do we work with you directly? Everybody wants to know.
Thank you. You can just check me out online. I'm on the accessconsciousness.com website /Diva Diaz. By the way, that actually is my name. My grandmother's called Diva, and so is my aunt. So I'm the third. It's not that exciting in my family. And I've got a niece called Eva, so we're all kind of obsessed with that name. But you can also go to divadiaz.com, and I've got a bunch of free material there and content that you can kind of start getting your hands on.
Oh, incredible, incredible. I'm going to make sure that there are clickable links in the show notes so that everybody can check you out. It's interesting. I always have kind of a sense of which episodes people are really going to reach out to me and say, this one hit me right in the feels. I think this is going to be one of them. I'm just saying. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was a true pleasure.
You too, Angie.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.